Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. If my mic sounds a little different right now, it's because I am in Manchester and I didn't have time to record before I left London, so I'm just using the computer and maybe no one will notice. And that means I spent a lot of money on a microphone I didn't need. But this interview this week, it's with another PhD person, so I seem to know a lot of PhDs at this point, or I know two at least, and I've interviewed both of them. But it's exciting to talk to people who are pursuing academics. And in this case, the guest really talks about that pursuit, but then what's next as well. And I'm kind of starting to be intrigued by people who are on the verge of something next, something that's happening soon, and for them. And so it's been fun to talk to them because I feel like we're starting to get into a time of change for a lot of people. At least that's what I'm observing. I have a couple of friends who've just started new jobs, a couple of friends who are looking for jobs. People I'm mentoring are getting out there for some jobs. I'm going to sign up for a mentor myself pretty soon at work too. And I think what I was thinking about earlier, what I was going to say on this is just how if you need help or you need something, ask for it. If you have questions, you're thinking about a new career, or you're thinking about some other life change or just something small, ask. There are people in your network, either your friend circle or in your professional network or maybe an activity network, who want to help. And I have found in the last year that's been so helpful to me. And I'm doing this school right now and have really formed some good relationships with a couple people, but with them too, it just comes down to being vulnerable and asking, and also letting them be vulnerable and letting them tell you and ask you what they need. And I've really just seen the value in that over time, and I didn't before. But as I've grown older, I've found that I have more confidence when I kind of show my vulnerability and show that I don't know certain things and I'm not sure what to do. So I don't know, maybe someone needs to hear that this week, and that's what I'm telling you. But enjoy this chat with Riva Riley. And at the top, I talk about how we met. So I'm trying not to repeat content from this part of the podcast to the little mini intro I do when I start to interview guests. That's maybe a format change that we're looking at here. We got episode 50 coming up pretty soon. So I'm excited because it's been a year since I started this podcast. So if you're a brand new listener, thanks for being here, and definitely check out all the episodes. And if you've been here the whole time, thank you so much. And anyone in between, thank you too. If you can follow, subscribe, whatever, on any platform, if you can please write reviews for me on Good Pods or on Apple, that would be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and stay well. Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside the workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. Here we go. All right, this week I have a guest that I actually met in London when I first moved here before the initial lockdowns. And she is American, but actually moved back to America. So we're now talking from London and the US, basically. And so this is Riva Riley, Postdoctoral Research Fellow at the University of Maryland. How's it going?
Hey, not so bad. How about you?
Good, good. So where are you today?
I am. So I'm in my apartment in College Park, Maryland. The University of Maryland is where I work. So I'm like, without traffic, like 25, 30-minute drive from the heart of DC.
Nice. That's cool. That's a cool area to be in. And what's funny is we didn't meet, just so people don't think I'm doing some postdoctoral research, because this might be the first time I've ever said that phrase.
It's not a common one.
No, we met doing comedy, but you ended up, where were you in London when we met? What school?
So we met at Queen Mary University. I was doing my first postdoctoral position there. I've been in England for a long time, but when we met, I was in East London, Queen Mary University.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And so, I mean, first of all, just the pursuit of higher education, not only to the doctoral level, but now postdoctoral. maybe talk through how you got on that whole path.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because I remember being in high school and, they were like, oh, STEM, that's good. You'll get a job if you study STEM. And they're like, what are your options? If you're good at math and science, well, you can be a doctor or something medical, or you can be an engineer. And that was sort of the options I grew up with. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. That was kind of the plan. And then I went to college, and suddenly you realize that there's this whole other world you've never even heard of. And I've always loved animals and fish, particularly when I was a little kid. I tell the story a lot, but it is more or less true. I really wanted a puppy. I really wanted one. Begged my parents. They didn't want the work of a dog. They got me a fish tank instead. Jokes on them. So I got to college and I had all these opportunities to kind of do my own little projects. I was lucky I went to college that had funding for that kind of thing. So, the more I was doing these projects, the more I realized that, like, wow, like all this intellectual freedom. I mean, academia is a really dumb career choice for a lot of reasons, but you do get this massive just ability to just think about the world and try to figure it out for yourself, which I think is a very kind of rare and precious thing. So it was a funny thing as well. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to grad school. I took the MCAT. I was like very much not sure what I was going to do. My poor parents were like, oh God, I hope this fish thing passes and she just gets a normal life because I don't know what we're going to do. I decided to take a gap year, got a research assistant position in St. Andrews, Scotland, actually.
Oh.
And there's also a St. Andrews in South Carolina. Right. So when I'm considering this position, I'm like, well, South Carolina, it's going to be a little rough, but all right. And then I realized it was in Scotland and it became a lot more. God. So that was good fun. And I loved my lab there. I decided to go for the PhD. I applied for the scholarship, this fellowship, the Marshall Scholarship to go there. I did not get it. I was really, really inconsolable. And my college fellowship advisor was like, all right, listen, we know you're upset, but like, just apply for this other thing. Like, just don't worry about it. Like, just apply for it. And I was like, whatever. And I applied and I got that. And that was to do a PhD at Cambridge in England. And I didn't even pay that much attention to it because my life was in so much turmoil. I didn't even know what was going to happen. So weirdly, that's when I got it. So then I ended up going to Cambridge, where I had some old friends and colleagues from my time in Scotland, and ended up doing a PhD there.
Wow. That's really cool. And so when you got, I guess, that rejection though, and not getting that, I mean, was it hard not only because you wanted it, but because was it kind of like, did you feel like it was telling you something about your work up to that point, or?
I've gotten rejected for so many things in so many different ways that I don't think any one rejection, but
so many ways I've been rejected.
Email, text message. Oh God, where to even start? So I don't think I would be as fazed by that, but I was younger, more naive then than I am now. And yeah, it was tough. I really loved my lab in Scotland. I was like, well, I know that doing a PhD is kind of impractical. I mean, it is funded. Science PhDs are generally funded, but it's still, earning potential does not justify the time investment. You have to really, really love it. But I loved my lab group there, and I was convinced I wanted to stay there. And it was a really prestigious scholarship, so it also seemed like it would justify it. Like, okay, like this is an impractical thing I'm doing, but if I get this prestigious scholarship, then it's okay. So that was really rough. And my parents, they didn't mean to not be supportive, but they really did not understand what I was doing or why. And they had that effect basically. So yeah, that was really rough. And even in the interview did not go great. Like I really care very deeply about animal welfare and, fish get a really bad rap. And I talk about fish welfare a lot. And one of my interviewers asked me about fish welfare in the context of Finland giving fish human rights. And I was like, oh, you mean dolphins? She's like, yeah. And then once your interviewers don't know that fish and dolphins are different, they probably aren't going to understand your work enough to care about it.
Right. That's interesting. Because that's something, I mean, I think I actually do know that. But I think it's something like I might say that I'm not interviewing an academic for their future and for a doctoral position, right? So who cares if I know what a dolphin is or a fish is? But when they're judging your work and if they're going to have you on board, then that's a bit tough.
Yeah. Like I think you really, without that fundamental knowledge, there's no way to judge my work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, gosh, that was a long time ago now. That was 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as your doctoral work, this week that we're recording this, my friend is on who's a neuroscientist, but we didn't really talk about her process of getting her doctorate and everything. So can you talk a little bit about that and just kind of what that process was in your research you did and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very lucky as an undergrad. I love the tropics. I love field work. I wrote a grant to go study this particular species of fish in the Amazon rainforest. And
Whoa.
a half hour before it was due, I realized that the fish I was writing the grant about didn't live in the area that I was going to. And, I'm like 20 or 21 years old. It's too late. I decided to just submit it anyway and see what happens. And I got it. So
oh, wow.
I basically had the effect of sending me to the Amazon rainforest without a plan. Like I knew I was going to study fish, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And when I was there, it was honestly like the most fun summer in the universe. I was running around in these jungle streams. There was peril. There was fascination. It was wonderful. I've been keeping fish for years, and I caught a Cory catfish. Actually, there's a good friend of mine who I met at the station. He caught the first one. So we're actually collaborating on a different project now. So we go way back. And Cory catfish are fish that I had kept in my fish tanks for years, and I was a kid, and I loved them so much. They're so charming. They really buck the catfish stereotypes, and anyway, I decided to research them because why not? And I discovered their social behavior, this novel sort of tactile interaction behavior where they kind of snuggle to talk to each other. In the literature, we termed it nudging. I did that later in my PhD. So that's what I did my PhD on, and I had that idea in mind when I applied for the fellowship I ultimately got that funded my PhD. And in that respect, I think my PhD was not totally unusual. A lot of people are in a similar position, but you also have a lot of people that start PhDs basically in systems and on projects that are already in place, whereas I kind of went in with my own one. And to be honest, I think I'm just going to come off as bitter right off the bat. I think if I were a man instead of a woman, I'd have had an easier time. I had a lot of people, like even now, people that will just try to argue with me about what I do. And I had to really even with the administration at my university, it was Cambridge, right? Cambridge is supposed to be this great university, and they wouldn't set the tanks up like I wanted them to, things like that. Yeah, so it took me 2 whole years to get my lab up and running, to get the fish settled. My PhD supervisor, he was supportive, but he's had 1 million students and 1 million postdocs, and I was not even close to the top of his priority list. And that was very frustrating. Once the fish were all set up, then it became this super kind of engaging, kind of fun time of all right, let's do these pilot experiments. Let's see what works. My research is really different than your sort of classic research in that I call it a lab, but it's a room full of fish tanks. And I have a paper that's published. And the way we did it is we put fish in a tank and we just walked at them to scare them. And then we saw what they did. It was really good fun. I got to mentor research undergraduates, in the course of that. And I really, really enjoyed that. I had fantastic undergrads during that time. And I have great undergrads now. So I've been really lucky in terms of being able to work with younger, more junior students who were really spectacular. And then it becomes so you do this experiment, you figure out what works, you have a research question, and then you start this process of publishing, and you're trying to publish papers while writing up a dissertation. And it's all very ritualistic, the process. I had to produce this dissertation. No one will ever read it. Yeah. The papers I publish from it will, they'll affect my career, but the dissertation itself, not so much. But the actual, and anyone can complain about their PhD a lot. There's a tremendous amount of freedom in it, just in terms of not only how you spend your time, but how you arrange your day, what you think about, all of that in many ways is a great privilege.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And just the fact that you kind of come up with what you're going to research. And so if I were to ask you, what's the impact of this research, something that I can understand or take away, what is it?
I have various spiels to answer that question. They're all context dependent. If I'm speaking to someone who doesn't really care about fish or wildlife particularly, I'll say something like, well, the fish brain looks very different from a human brain, right? It looks a lot simpler. And that's why for so long people thought fish were stupid. For example, there's an idea that fish only have a 3 to 5 second memory. That's obviously, right? Now that is some hot bullshit. Can I swear on this?
Yeah, you can. I just have an explicit tag. It's fine.
But you can just edit that.
No, you're fine.
That's hot nonsense. And they did this experiment with goldfish where they're like, let's see how long their memory actually is. And they ran out of funding and they'd already remembered for 3 months. Fish have spectacular memories. You can train fish to do things. And they can engage in some really complex behaviors. All different kinds of fish can do all these different kinds of things, even though their brain is so different from ours, right?
Interesting.
So, so if they can accomplish the same kind of cognitive and social complexity. I mean, certainly not as humans, but like as lizards or as even to some extent, some mammals, if they can do that, there must be there's aspects of the brain, and there's aspects of neuroscience that we certainly don't understand. So what my research does is it takes this fish that accomplishes this task of communication in this totally different way, via these tactile interactions. And by understanding how that happens, we can imagine how that could have huge effects on various things that can affect humans down the line. Even my fish are really intensely social, and yet the neurological basis for their sociality is potentially very different from ours. And if we understood this kind of alternate pathway to social behavior, that might be useful for treating certain psychological disorders in humans. We're a long way away from that. But that's the kind of big picture that the more we understand about this alternate reality of cognition and sociality, the more we might be able to apply what we understand to ourselves. In a more proximate sort of, why is this useful? What does it tell us? Well, we know that evolution, we think about evolution as being this dog-eat-dog world, right? Mm-hmm. Survival of the fittest, who can murder who the fastest. And a lot of the times that's what it is. However, we have so many examples, including humans, cases where, we're not really dog-eat-dog at all. We are intensely collaborative, intensely social. Humans, we literally need other humans to live. I think humans are one of the only species that requires social support to give birth because of our stupid bipedal pelvises, but that's a different issue. So this evolution of social behavior is really interesting. How did it happen? What are the mechanisms underlying how it happened? Maybe doesn't have clinical significance, but I think, as humans, we're very curious about how we came to be, right? Why are we like this? How did it happen? And I think these fish, by looking at a system that's much simpler than us, but does some similar things, will give us some really fundamental insight about, how we evolved. How did it happen?
Yeah. Something that I wouldn't think of on my own, this kind of thing. So it's pretty cool. So now, I guess, you're still researching with the catfish, or?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
So how long does your current project take, or you don't know? It just depends on what happens.
Yeah. So I have a 2-year fellowship. I'm coming to the end of the first year. And I don't know what's going to happen after that. But just my academia is a dumb career. I love what I do. I love teaching. I'm very good at teaching. I love the fish I study. But, the academic job market has been a shit show for a very long time. I have made this conscious decision that I don't want to give up my life for it. I don't want to be chasing postdoc positions, for the rest of my life. Yeah,
because you basically end up applying for fellowship after fellowship after fellowship.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And I'm even privileged in the sense that my fellowship allows me to do my own work. I'm not someone's employee. That's what I was doing in London. It's my own research. It's my own stuff. So I don't know. I'm going to go in the academic job market this cycle. I feel like I'm a really iffy candidate in terms of my system is still very new. I'll have a lot of published papers that come out kind of next spring, I think, just looking at timings of when I think things will happen. So I'm going in the academic job market this cycle, and then I'm going to give it one more stab next cycle if I don't find a professorship, basically. And then after that, I'm going to have a real hard, long think about my life.
Yeah, it does sound like a tough career, just because it's only stable for that little amount of time.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm also, not having a partner and a family right now. I'm very mobile, at least,
Yeah.
But people who do have partners, you can't really drag, a partner and certainly not kids around for years and years and years. So you see that a lot with people who could be really promising scientists, but they're like, no, I can't go to rural Nebraska for 3 years. So yeah, it's definitely tricksy. I think you really have to love what you're doing to have it make any sense.
So then, as far as with animal welfare, you said that was really important to you, and you're doing research with animals. So how have those two things intersected for you?
Yeah, this is very interesting. So I actually, I care very, very much about the fish I study. I want the fish I study to be lucky for having to come live with me, which is not typical of animal research. I turned down research opportunities as an undergrad and even a PhD student because I just refused to hurt animals. And it's very extreme. It's not popular amongst my colleagues. I don't talk about it very much in that context. At the moment, it's my fish, the fish I study. They're these little, like 2 to 3 inches max. So they're these little fish. They're really common in aquariums. So I actually did my PhD on fish we got from the local pet store. Now I have wild caught fish, but the fish for my PhD are alive and well. They were adopted by my lab mates, and they're still young. The record for the species I study is 34 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Just nuts. I think 10 to 15 is more common. So if, they're treated well in good conditions, they live as long as a dog or a cat. So in the fish that I'm studying now, like, there is a certain amount of inevitable stress that you have to put animals through when you study them. We have to film them in certain tanks because so my fish, they're these little catfish, they move along the bottom. We film them from above, and we have to film them in tanks without a lot of stuff that obscures the view of the camera. So I have to move them to those tanks and sort of think about what I think is ethical, and then I make peace with it. So in the case of netting, it's a minimal stress, it's quick, they recover from it. I can make peace with that, but I'm not gonna escalate too much beyond that. So it's a really kind of strange, odd one. I think part of how I make my own peace with it is that I know that the fish will have good lives. I know that, like, even when I'm done with them, if I can't take care of them anymore, I will make sure that they go to a good home. And there's a lot of really passionate aquarists. One of my favorite online spaces is Planet Catfish, the online forum for ornamental catfish enthusiasts. It's one of the most wholesome places ever. There's protocols I use right now that I started doing because they were suggested to me by just, not scientists, just people who love these fish and have had them and know about them, more than even scientists do sometimes. So that's kind of how I make my peace with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because and then there's the whole idea just in what we purchase, we can look and see if animals were not even harmed, but even used. I can't imagine just that it's pleasant for animals even to be used for cosmetics, much less harmed or not. I just can't imagine that they enjoy this for any reason. And so, there's things like that we can do, but.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was raised vegetarian, which helps a lot, and not quite vegan yet. I really should be, but the way that we identify with the things we're used to, I understand why people who vaguely think they should be vegetarian don't do it. I understand that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a big change, and then vegan is even a bigger change. And I think there's different reasons people do it, for health or for animals in the environment or just for other things. But I can say I try to have vegan days, but I'm not good about it, and
that's kind of what I do. Yeah. Where I don't keep milk in the house or eggs in the house, but I'm sticking with the vegetarianism because I've been doing that my whole life, but I'll definitely have non-vegan things if I'm out and about, sometimes just to make life easier, sometimes because I really like ice cream. And, it's one of these things where you take a good hard look at yourself in the mirror every day and just hope that,
what you did was okay.
Exactly.
So do you have any other animals that you really like other than fish that?
I do. Yes. So fish, I think I could get really, really enthusiastic about almost any animal. And any animal that I'm given care of, I think I'm just going to love very much. Like, I recently came into possession of the family turtle. I'm going to show her to you. Here she is. Yeah. I never cared much. I never thought much about turtles until I took her back in August, and now I would die for her. And personal love for this specific turtle aside, like, turtles are just wild. Like, you may have heard this, like, turtles don't live in their shells. Turtles are their shells. Like, their spines are fused to their shell. Like, the shell is, I know, right? And no one told us this. Like, I remember. No,
I always thought they could come out of it literally come out of their shell.
Literally. Yeah. And I remember this book, and I used to love it. It was, so long ago. I forget the author, but it was like Franklin the Turtle. And there's this thing where he comes out of his shell, and then he's just like this naked turtle. And I'm like, they lied to us. Franklin lied to us. Anyway, this is recent revelations with the turtle. So I'm really into turtles now. I just think they're spectacular, and just the resiliency of turtles. Like, oh my God, it's so hard for turtles to make a living, and they do it, So I've learned a lot about turtles recently.
I actually this is going to be weird, but whatever. People can be used to it. Like, I did this reading, and I got one of my spirit animal thing was like a turtle. And the way the turtle was described in this context, though, was that they'll be out when they want to see people and, interact and make a difference. But then they need someplace to go where they feel safe. And I was like, oh, that kind of is me, because I'm this introvert who appears to be an extrovert.
Yes, I identify with that very much as well.
Yeah. And I always thought I was an extrovert, but then I found about 10 years ago, someone pointed out that because my scores on the Myers-Briggs and all these things were never like purely one or the other. And they said, well, yeah, because you're an introvert and my mom's like, well, I could have told you that. Like when you were a kid, you would sit in your room by yourself and then you come out and talk and then you go back. And I'm like, oh. So yeah, so I'm kind of a turtle, just so you know.
I totally get it. Yeah. I think I'm also like that. I also call myself an introvert who like presents as an extrovert.
Yeah. So that's when we're out of our shells.
Yeah. And they do. So my turtle, so this is not my fault. I just want the record to reflect that I did not do this. The turtle is obese. And she came to me that way. I think she's been obese for a while.
I didn't know they could be obese.
Me neither. I didn't know that was a potential problem. I'm an adult zoologist and I'm still learning things like that. And
so
what ways you can know that they're obese is if they can't fit into their own shell. And for a while, I'm like, she's just really confident. She just doesn't feel the need to go in her shell. But it's been almost a year, and I haven't seen her all the way in her shell, so I don't think she can fit.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea about
I know.
this.
She can get her head in all the way, but then her legs are sticking out, like not all the way, but like a little. She's very cute. Like I was like, I'm gonna whip this turtle into shape. I have not done that at all.
She can get her own Peloton.
Exactly. She can do laps. She lives in a big tank. She's fine.
Oh my gosh, that's so nuts. So and besides all this work you're doing and ongoing research, you also are, well, I mentioned that we met at comedy, but besides comedy, which we've talked a lot about comedy on this podcast, to be honest. So you're also a writer and you're actually a published writer. So how did you decide to go from someone who's like, oh, I like to write, to actually pursuing that?
Probably the real answer to that is like adolescent delusions. But I've always like written fiction for fun. I've been doing this since I was a kid, like since, like literally like 10, 11. And I wrote this, and in retrospect, like insane, appallingly bad fantasy novel when I was in high school. And I was like, I'm going to publish it. It's going to be great. And I read about how you do it. I sent queries to agents, and they were all like, no, thank you, child. And that was, and then you kind of get to this point where like fiction writing, not unlike science, is something that I think, I do. And I think generally should be done because you love to do it and not because you expect anything tangible to come from it. So I clearly liked it enough and still really, love that power to tell a story. I used to think of it like becoming the god of your own little universe. And now as I get kind of like older and more world weary, it's just a way to try to make sense of the insanity of it all. But I did take some creative writing classes in college. I did an English minor. Creative writing classes in college, I was always the only scientist in them. So I almost like didn't know how to talk to the English majors. Like that's kind of a joke, but not entirely. Sometimes I would make a joke that I thought was really funny. And I mean literal crickets once. They didn't seem to get it at all. And I could tell because we'd write these short stories in these classes and we'd workshop them. And we'd do like 2 or 3 a class. And I could always tell which one the class would like the best because it was the one I liked the least, So I thought a lot about like who am I writing for in an ideal world and what am I trying to convey? And that was really useful even just for that exercise. So after that, I didn't really publish anything formally at all in college. I did work on this little novel that I got it was through a Twitter thing. So my best friend from high school is also really into fiction writing. That's part of how we bonded when we were young. And she was like, Riva, there's this Twitter pitch contest. I think we have to get a Twitter account for it. That's why I got a Twitter account. And then a small publisher, you tweet this tweet length pitch for your book, and a small publisher picked up mine. But it had been rejected several times at that point. So then I published that under a pseudonym because it was about scientists, and I didn't want people to think it was about me, And then after that, I decided to focus more on short fiction because you could kind of, in terms of like, submitting to publishers and stuff and getting feedback, more bang for your buck. So I've published some short stories and flash fiction in the past few years, and then I have a novella coming out. It'll be in 2022. So the editor and I are just finishing edits on that now.
Wow, that's exciting. So with the book, the first one under the pseudonym, did it sell? Like, how did it go? I mean,
not really. It was this really tiny publisher, and even I understood that it was mostly going to be about working with an editor and getting that sort of professional attention for the first time. It sold a little bit. Like, I think it was Amazon's Women Adventure category. It I think once broke the top 100 or something. Like, it didn't really.
That's cool though.
It didn't really. I didn't make any appreciable amount of money off it or anything.
Yeah.
But it did kind of make the rounds a little bit. It was good, a really good experience. The publisher eventually 5 years or something after it was a really new publisher then, and it was this indie publisher, and it was going well in the beginning. So it was just an ebook, but then they did print some. They did some printing copies. But then I think the economics of it didn't make sense to them, and they ended up folding. So yeah, that was a very good experience, but not like a humongous success or anything.
And then how has that informed what you're doing now though with your editor? Did that help you kind of just with lessons learned and stuff you carried forward, or is it so different between editors?
Between editors varies. I think it did help me in terms of just improving my writing, because you write and you're just writing for yourself, and then you have to at some point go back and think about how readers interpret it, because obviously they don't know everything that you know and all of that. So I thought that was very helpful for just putting myself in the reader's perspective more, and even just thinking about how characters came off. So I think it really improved my writing, and also it was good in that I've been lucky. All the editors I've worked with have been really just respectful and really great. I've really enjoyed working with them. But it definitely gave me a sense for how an editor looks at a manuscript. I think that made my writing stronger.
Yeah, you kind of realize what's going to be important. And
yeah, exactly.
So does having this other career basically of a writer while you're also doing your postdoc work, does one of them help the other as far as just maybe, I'm just picturing maybe something goes poorly with research one day, then do you write more that day, or is there anything where they inform each other at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly even scientists need to be good writers. So even just the mechanics of being able to write well, I think have been extremely useful to me as a scientist. Scientific papers are notoriously dry and horrible to read, and I'm not even going to argue with that. But obviously you have to write grant proposals, you have to write all these other pieces of writing, and I think that's useful. I think it's really healthy to not have your whole identity be based on one job or one thing. And I think that's been really good, because if something really goes wrong in the lab and I'm really frustrated and my boss undermines me horribly in a lab meeting or something, that's not my whole life. That's not, that's not something that I have to sit with forever. I get to go into these other worlds and I get to tell these stories, and that's, kind of freedom that really can't be taken away from me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about that dynamic, I guess, too, that you just mentioned, because that happens to me, or it has happened to me, where someone will just undermine me. It's I know what I'm doing. I know my job. And then they just decide, I think it happened today, actually, someone decided we didn't need to do something. And I said, we did. Now they think we do. It's well, I said that. Yeah. But then I had my conversation with you coming up, so I couldn't be focused on that until I brought it up now.
But exactly. Yeah. That there's these other, and I think to some extent comedy had the same effect for me, that there's this other part of my life that they can't, because in any job, really, I think maybe particularly academia, certainly your PhD supervisor, and then right now my research mentor guy, they have so much power over you, right? And the dynamics of work. I mean, yeah, how many times have I seen a woman suggest something, everyone ignores her, and then a man says the same? I mean, that's
yeah,
I know that they can't see my gestures, but I'm yeah,
no, but it's a thing. We're both gesticulating with our hands, that, yeah, no, because it does happen, and it's just kind of one of those things where you get tired of it, and sometimes you're going to say something and sometimes you're not, just because, you know.
Energy isn't infinite, and I definitely feel that. So yeah, in that respect, it's all these creative outlets, they're at least the creation of them is mine. You know, like obviously I do want to release them into the world and I want other people to experience them and critique them and all that. But the actual like making it, that belongs to me.
Mm-hmm. So with your fiction, with your stories, do you have a way you come up with things? Do you have like a notebook where you just have all these ideas, like kind of like with jokes, like you just have all these ideas and you turn them into something, or is it a bit more of a different process?
It's fine. I used to actually have a physical notebook, and now I put everything on my phone. So I have all these notes tabs. And yeah, that is kind of it. But usually it starts with some kind of like seed of an idea. Sometimes I mull them over for ages, and sometimes I just start writing right away, and I have yet to think of any sort of reason for why one of those occurs versus the other. And this is most of the time they're things that I like, and this is, humans don't talk about this, and I don't even know how to talk about this, but most of us have these like ongoing, fantasies or movies in our head, and like not even sexual, right? Just like these like scenarios that we play out for ourselves. I think that's like a really common behavior that it's very personal, very intimate, and we don't really talk about it. But I think the way that I sort of work through my fiction is often in that context where even if I'm, just taking a walk or doing something monotonous, cleaning the apartment, I sort of have this like, this like movie playing in my head that I control, right?
Yeah.
And I can like look at a scene and be like, oh, is that right? Is that what the characters would do? Oh, okay, no, I don't think so. Here's why. Or like, is that a dynamic I want? So that's very like, it's very engaging. I don't know. I find it, I've been like that in terms of the way that I, spend my daydreaming time, for lack of a better word, from my whole life, basically. I suspect my dad is like that as well, but again, we've never spoken about it.
Yeah. Well, if maybe he'll listen and then he'll talk to you.
Yeah, maybe.
This will bring you guys together on this subject.
Maybe, yeah. So often it comes from that, and then like if I think of like something I think is really good and powerful, then I put it in the notes. Editing in different drafts, and early drafts are almost always terrible, and that's another thing is that you sort of have to like when you write, especially in the beginning, you're not writing to write something good, you're just writing to get started, and that was like a psychological shift. I think it's very liberating. I think that it has helped me write much better in the long run.
When you realize it doesn't have to be perfect right away, right?
Exactly. And for some reason, I don't know, I came to comedy later than fiction, but that's certainly how I've interacted with like writing jokes and sets, is that it's, I know it's going to need work in the beginning. That's okay.
Yeah.
You need to get to the act of creating it,
Yeah, you need to say, I know with a new joke, it's rare that it's just going to work completely the first time.
Yeah.
But you need to say it to see what part worked and what part didn't, or if none of it did, and move on or whatever. Exactly.
Right. And like, it's just so, God, there's such diversity of minds in the world, right? The way people experience things. And, there's definitely times when I literally don't know if something is funny or not.
Yeah. Or you don't even know how you're going to feel saying it. Like, oh, I don't feel great saying that. Even if it is funny, I feel gross.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, you know?
For sure. Or like, I'm going to put that in there. It probably won't get much. And that's what kills. Like,
yeah. And you go, what? Why do you guys think that's funny?
Yeah. Like what made that work?
Like a punchline shouldn't be spinach, or something like
exactly.
whatever it is.
Exactly. And fiction is, I think, not dissimilar, that like there'll be a character that I write thinking, and they'll be like, oh, that character really spoke to me. And I was like, really? Didn't speak to me, but all right. So the way we experience each other in each other's work and stuff is so diverse and interesting in and of itself.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I mean, just to have like the two sides of you, you're able to express the side with the animals and with science, especially, but then also with the fiction writing, especially the fiction, because there's something about actually making up stories versus just talking about yourself that I think is pretty. Yeah.
And they're very different, like in terms of, because humans, we want attention. I like it when people laugh at my jokes. I'm like, haha, good job, me, And the fiction's a very different experience. Like in some ways, like it's, it definitely feels like, there's someone talking, reacting to your ideas instead of the way you're presenting yourself. Yeah. And that's, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's very different.
Yeah. Well, and then with your comedy, I mean, just to touch on that, I think we have similar styles in the sense we both do storytelling and observational and personal narrative. And how did you start doing comedy?
During my PhDs in England work a little different. In the UK work different in the US. In the US, you take classes for a while. You don't do that in the UK. But there's this big move to get students transferable skills. So there's this mandatory number of transferable skills training hours you need. I know this sounds like a diversion, but I swear it's relevant. Because in the last year, I just sort of neglected that. Like, not entirely, but like more than I should. And you're supposed to do them all in your first 2 or 3 years. So I needed to find a certain number, like a certain number of seminars that fit into my experimental schedule. And there was this one I needed, one of them that I had to have. I had 2 choices that fit with my experiment that I was working on. And one was like advanced theoretical biostatistics, which I had already taken a pretty rigorous undergraduate course, theoretical statistics. And then the other was stand-up comedy for scientists.
It's hot at Cambridge.
Hot at Cambridge. So guess which one I picked? So I went to that and kind of having this vague thought that I'd seen science comedy before. It's, I think, actually a really powerful outreach tool when it's done well and works. And I've always liked, kind of being funny. I liked being the funny one, group settings and whatever. So I thought, I'll go give it a go. There was this group that ran it. Honestly, I think it's a great, because it seems so stupid when I say it, but I think actually it was wonderful, because even the people who never went on to do stand-up comedy, it's just so good for your public speaking and engaging.
Yeah, sure.
I think it was legitimately a very useful exercise, even though it sounds silly. And the people running it ran the stand-up comedy group out of Cambridge called The Variables. I did a show with them and had a great time. And I met friends doing it, so
yeah,
you go. And so my earliest sets were actually about my fish and, about the science and stuff and about doing field work. And, it was really fun. It was such a fun group of people that did it. And honestly, it's funny because I remember when I moved to London, I decided to do like normal, and I'm doing sarcastic air quotes now, normal stand-up. And the reason I was compelled to do that is because I had written this set to do with the science group, and they wouldn't let me do it. And that was about like my own being biracial, my own background, and they didn't want anything controversial at all. So I decided to do normal stand-up, and I was so intimidated because I'm like, oh my God, all the people doing normal stand-up in London are going to be so much better than scientists. And on the open mic level, they are not.
No.
I actually think that like the science comedians were great.
Mm-hmm.
Even now thinking about it, I think they were like legitimately very funny. And there was more quality control and stuff for that, obviously, than there was like an open mic night. But yes, that's how I got started, and I did that. Not even that often. Maybe like 3 or 4 shows a year. It's good fun. And then in London, I decided to go at it more seriously, especially because I was like an employee postdoc in London. I was hired to work on a project. So I wanted to do a good job, but I wasn't personally invested in it. And I was like, well, working a 9 to 5, let's clock out at 5 and go give this comedy thing a go.
I like how your science led you to that too.
Yeah, right? That's a typical route to stand-up comedy.
A question I like to ask everybody before I get to my end questions, which are called the Fun 5, is do you have any advice or mantra that you want to share that maybe has been helpful to you?
I hate giving this as advice, but especially, and I see this all the time in terms of the students I teach. And so this is another random thing. So PhDs in England are shorter than the ones in the US. You have a maximum of 4 years. It's a hard cap. And it's really common to only get 3 years of funding. And that's what happened to me. So I took the full 4 years, but I only had 3 years of funding. So I funded the last year of my PhD by working as a tutor. I liked teaching a lot. I did a lot of online tutoring because I was foreign, right? So I couldn't actually freelance. So I did it in the States where I was a citizen. I've kept that up as a good side gig, as a way, especially during the pandemic, of staying busy. London is very expensive and postdoc salaries are not very high. So that sort of let me still, go out and do nice things. I see all the time that on average, my female students are stronger and more competent than my male ones, but much less confident. And I see that in the students that I teach, even like in the higher education. And I hate telling women to be resilient because I think that's shitty. But I think whatever extent I could, specifically tell young women that the way you're treated does not reflect on you. It reflects on the person doing that. Like in professional context, personal context. I feel like that's kind of cliched advice, but it's really stuck with me the more students I work with. Some of my women students, I'm not even sure they need a tutor. Sometimes I just think they need like a self-esteem coach. Yeah. Because some of them are extraordinary, and they don't see it at all.
Yeah. No, I think that's not that cliche. I think it's true. And it's something that I do some mentoring of different people. And a big thing is usually just them not having confidence versus capability. It's
like shocking almost. And like I see it in, even like in stuff that myself, like I try to be more confident now, but like, especially as it's so much easier as a woman to be self-deprecating. People like me more when I'm self-deprecating, like especially men. And that's like a really hideous thing that like, obviously I don't know how to address the systemic nature of that, but
yeah. No, well, that's good advice. Okay, cool. Well, now the fun five. So, what is the oldest T-shirt you have and still wear?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Oh man, this is a little embarrassing. I still have. This is real life. I still have an old T-shirt from when I played youth basketball when I was 10 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And why do I still have? I only wear it as PJs. I don't leave the house. Why do I still have that? I don't know. I mean, I went through a phase when I was very young where I was convinced I was going to become a professional basketball player, and I was one of these kids that had a really early growth spurt. Like at one point, the growth charts predicted I would be 7 feet tall. I know, right? And it's funny because my dad's a really tall guy, but my mom's really short, and her genes kicked in, and now I'm like a very like normal like 5'7", you know. But I was convinced I was going to become a professional basketball. I was determined that I was going to turn the WNBA into as big a deal as the NBA, which it's embarrassing to say out loud now, but I believed that at like age 8, and I did youth basketball when I was like 9 and 10, and I was pretty good then. But again, I was like literally like a foot taller than the other kids. I mean, and like I have mildly disproportionately long arms. I was like an orangutan on the court, and these poor little normal kids. I remember realizing later on, once the other kids caught up to me, that I wasn't actually that good at basketball. But for those 2 years, I was just tall, and I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I had this catastrophic ankle injury when I was 10. And that ended my basketball career. Oh. I mean, eventually my lack of talent would have ended my basketball career, but it felt like that's what ended it when I was 10. So maybe it's just some leftover fondness for that other life.
Okay, nice. All right. So this one is a pandemic question, but we're not out of it yet. So it's going to stay. If every day was really Groundhog's Day, like the movie, what song would you have your alarm clock set to play every morning?
I actually have my alarm set to a song, and that's been waking me up for several years now. And I'd probably stick with that one. It's I do like it a lot. It's called Beachcomber by Real Estate. I actually originally I heard it like in the background of like a TV show, and there was just something about it where I looked it up, and I've been through periods where I'm really obsessed with it. And even like there's something like maybe musically about it where like I in a different life, I played the piano a lot, and I still dabble every once in a while. And I think about that, like music structure, and there's just something about the way it's structured that like is very, I don't know, like it's easy to I make up sometimes my own little lyrics to it, and I sing them to the fish and the turtle. And I have a cat now, and I think I would probably stick with that one.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna check it out for sure. I have a Spotify playlist, so it'll get added there. Cool. Yeah. All right. Coffee or tea or neither?
Ooh, so it's probably both. Like, I do like my coffee a lot. England is weird with coffee. Have you experienced that?
Well, just what people like tea.
Oh,
They like really dark coffee too, in my opinion. Like they're European influenced.
Yes, there's like here's your like really intense espresso that takes 3.5 hours to make and it costs like $1 million. Or here's your shitty instant coffee. There you go.
Yeah.
But I do quite like coffee, and I've gotten really into making cold brew. That's been one of my
my friend just got a cold brew, and like I think he had too much a couple of days because it's really easy just to.
I didn't. Yeah, I remember once I was getting like palpitations, and I was like,
oh, that's what he said too. I got really
constant.
excited about his palpitations just now, but yeah,
no, but like it's wild. It is because it's a concentrate, and you have to like dilute it.
Okay.
But yes, but I also really like tea. Like my mom is Indian. I grew up with chai and stuff, and
oh, nice.
I can't get chai lattes out and about because they're all bullshit. I feel like I've sworn a lot of this. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Don't worry.
They're all nonsense. And but like even just like I can get into like the like different green teas and white tea, and it's like a whole thing. Yeah. So I actually really like them both. But I think they serve different. Well, I don't know, because getting a coffee is such a classic social activity, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like, and for some reason, getting a tea weirdly, maybe it's because I lived in England so long, it almost feels more intimate. Like you have a tea in someone's home, they make you a tea. Whereas coffee, you get out in a cafe.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
So I don't know what to make of that, but yeah.
So both. Cool. And can you think of a time you laughed so hard you cried and couldn't stop, or just something that kind of makes you lose it when it happens?
Yeah. Okay. So this is somewhat recent. My dad and my parents and I were visiting with one of my cousins who's in the Air Force, and he was telling us Air Force stories. And he was telling us that, I forget where it was. It was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, maybe. Oh, I'm forgetting now. It was a specific country there, and they actually bring out these dogs to sniff out for snakes, right? And I misheard it. I think I misheard it that I thought they brought on snakes on because he also talked about how they sniff for drugs. And like they brought snakes on to sniff for drugs. And my dad and I don't know, we just worked each other up into this like conniption because it was like, well, how do you put a snake in a harness? Like obviously it's gonna like slither right up. And then my dad did the facial expression of like a snake like with its tongue flicking out, like trying to find drugs, and we were beside ourselves.
It's so bizarre to
Just,
envision.
right? And my mom's there like, all right, I guess,
That's good. I feel like your dad's really, done a good shout to your parents in this podcast.
Yeah.
Like your dad specifically, he might have even written about the drug sniffing snakes now. We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, who knows? Yeah, no, my dad and I, we can sometimes vibe in this very specific way where we just like get inconsolably, hysterical.
That's cool. All right. So the last one, who inspires you right now?
That's an interesting one. Who inspires me right now? The pandemic has been interesting, right? Because obviously, like, it's been really isolating, and my best friend has been a turtle for a long period of time. I think I earlier said that I would take a bullet for the turtle, and I stand by that. In a weird way, I think it's also kind of like brought me closer to the people I love, in that we're all sort of isolated. There's a lot of these virtual interactions, which obviously aren't as satisfying as real life ones because, we did not evolve to like Zoom.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've drawn a lot of inspiration from various friends of mine and how they're handling things. So I've got, the first year of my PhD, my best friend was a master's student, and then she left me, and I don't make friends with master's students. But there was three of us. There's me and two master's students, and we hung out all the time. And they're not PhD students at North Carolina, at Chapel Hill. Actually, one of them just finished her PhD. But anyway, they were so passionate and constructive about trying to affect change over the last couple of years with the obviously this political nightmare and the disaster of our lack of national empathy in the States. And the way that they coordinated that so unselfishly, I thought was really wonderful. And like my best friend from college moved to Washington State, and just the way that the attitude that she's managed to truly assimilate about dealing with some of the things that we've all been through, they've helped me get through it, and I feel like those sorts of things of just seeing all the admirable, wonderful things about the people I already knew and loved and really appreciating that, I think has been a really powerful part of this. Like my sisters, even I feel like I've gotten to know facets of them that are just really, it's not that I just never appreciated how wonderful they were. So I think that's all been eye-opening.
Oh, that's great. That's really nice. Yeah.
Thanks. I feel very lucky.
And I know what you mean though. I have some friends who I've gotten closer to, and some who are just gone, and it kind of, I don't know. I learned to let go though. Yeah. More than I would have if it wasn't this thing. 'Cause it was so obvious. Right.
Yeah.
It's obvious where we stand. So
exactly. Yeah. There's no hiding. Yeah. It's better to know. And it's weird. Yeah. And that's a hard part of growing up and becoming an adult, is that it's better to know hurtful things a lot of the times than not. Life is richer when you can react and adjust your life accordingly, even though it's more painful at first.
Yep.
But yeah, it's been definitely, the pandemic still looms large. I mean, I'm very privileged and lucky. I'm fully vaccinated and I have human friends now, not to brag, but I still spend a lot of time with my turtle, who is, like I said, just 15 out of 10 turtle. I did start an existential web comedy about my turtle.
Oh yeah. So that's my next question too. So that's a good segue. So if people want to find you and if they want to find this web comedy, and I'll have links on the site and in show notes, but where should they go?
So I have a YouTube channel, so I have some stand-up stuff on there, and 2 episode of my existential turtle web comedy, The Pinnacle of Turtality. So cool.
So your YouTube channel, which I'll link, and then you're on what, Insta? Well, I know where you are, just I know you, but for other people.
So I'm on Instagram, Riva J. Riley, and same with Twitter. I also have a Facebook. I don't know. I feel old. I feel like I should know social media better. Because I have a Facebook as well, but that does not seem like the way to, you can find
I feel like Facebook's it's become this thing where I know in comedy you have to add people, or even on this.
You do, yeah.
I don't really want to, because it's that's where my friends were before.
Exactly. So, I always thought Twitter and Instagram were for networking, and Facebook was for, but it seems like there's a lot of blurred lines there. Yeah. So, but I'm on Facebook as well. Okay, cool. All right. Well, Riva, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun. This is awesome. Thank you for having me. It's great to catch up too. Yeah, totally. Thanks again for listening this week.
You can find out more about the guest in the show notes and at robbiesaid.com. Joe Maffia created the music just for this podcast. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Metke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let me know who you'd like to hear from or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work. Follow at More Than Work Pod or send a message on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Or visit our website, morethanworkpod.com. Give us a follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review if you like. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. While being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.